where opportunities exist not as talking points by politicians, but as a real path towards economic migration for us collectively as a people. We said, for instance, that diversity was the strength in our nation, but we just didn't make plans for housing, for transit, or even for jobs for the millions of immigrants we're bringing in. We said we believed, for instance, in free speech, but we punished dissent. And now we as people, we've actually become more obsessed about our political preferences, our political parties and affiliations, not the systems that shape the quality of life for all of us collectively as Canadians. We're seeing record numbers at food banks. We're seeing healthcare system that is stretched to the maximum, where rent demands more than half of your monthly income, where people with full-time jobs still live in borderline poverty line. Over 50% of young adults 18 to 24 years would possibly remain jobless. I want to take a moment to speak not just as a podcast host, not even as someone with opinions, but as a fellow citizen, as an observer and a participant in this Canadian experiment. There's a question that has been sitting with me of late. It's not quite a rhetorical question. It's not even political in the sense of the narrow partisan preferences. It's a broader one. It's more related to the existential state of our nation, Canada, and it is whether or not the desired Canada is possible again in 2025. And by the word desired, I don't just mean a perfect nation. I don't mean utopia. I mean the kind of country many of us either believed existed in the past or desperately hope could exist right now. A country where things made sense. A country where hard work led to stability of lives, where debates were grounded in reason and not in political or ideological retribution, as it were. On one hand, I came to this country about a decade ago because I saw a country that still had elements of some of these values that I talked about. But if you're like me, you might be asking yourself right now, what happened to Canada? I have 5 important points that I want to talk about with respect to the question whether the desired Canada is still possible in 2025. The first thing is to define what I mean by the desired Canada. For some of us, it was the promise of a middle-class life that is built not on luck, not on inheritance passed down to you by parents, which nothing is wrong with that, but on effort. I believe this is the case actually for many first-generation immigrants like myself. For others, it was actually a place to start all over again, having escaped the corruption, the repression of their voices, and violence and wars in their home countries from different parts of the world. For many, it was the idea of a Canada that is calm, that is stable, and where outcomes can be measured towards individual successes. It was never a perfect country, and I don't think it's supposed to be, but it was supposed to work for the people. But let's talk about some of the issues we're seeing right now. Talked about them many times in the past. We're seeing record numbers at food banks. We're seeing healthcare system that is stretched to the maximum, where rent demands more than half of your monthly income, where people with full-time jobs still live in borderline poverty line, where young people have actually given up on the hope of home ownership altogether. We now live in a country with 7% unemployment rate. And if you compare in 2023, for instance, it would only take the average person about 18 weeks to find a job. But on the average right now, it would take you 22 weeks to find a job. That's from the recent data by Stats Canada. And youth unemployment also just went over 54% in the recent release. That's not just the data. That means over 50% of young adults 18 to 24 years would possibly remain jobless, not able to find a job in their own country. That's not just data. That's delay, that's disillusionment, that's depression that could set in for many young people. And increasingly, just looking at the recent political climates, many begin to feel like they're being gaslit by the system. They're told, oh, things are fine. If you're struggling, it's probably just a personal failure on your part, or worse off, you just have an outdated mindset, or you believed the talking points of conservatives, or you're not just liberal enough. I don't think those things cut it. But what if the problem isn't you as an individual. It's not us as people in the nation, let's say. What if the problem is with the system in our nation that is drifting away from its promise? Let me talk about the second point, which is, when did that drift begin? Some people blame that drift on the pandemic, just about 4 years ago now. Some blame it on immigration levels. Some blame it on global capitalism. I'm talking about globalization in this case. Some blame it on tech monopolies and business giants, and some blame it on political correctness, and others on climate policies. But maybe it's not any of those things, or maybe it's not just one thing. Maybe it's the compounded effects of leaders who are treating symptoms in our systems and not the causes of these problems. Maybe it's policies that are focused on appeasing the people, not on measurable, tangible outcomes. So within society, maybe we stopped being honest with ourselves as people. We said, for instance, that diversity was the strength in our nation, but we just didn't make plans for housing, for transit, or even for jobs for the millions of immigrants we're bringing in. We said we believed, for instance, in free speech, but we punish dissent once it's inconvenient for us. We claim to be tolerant until someone questions the dominant narrative, and then we realize how intolerant we could be as people. What we now have in Canada right now is a Canada of contradictions, a Canada where ideals have become slogans on the lips of politicians, and slogans have become political shields that are not necessarily there to spark change, but they're used to deflect criticism and to shut down dissent among us as people. And now we as people, we've actually become more obsessed about our political preferences, our political parties and affiliations, not the systems that shape the quality of life for all of us collectively as Canadians. Let me talk about the system here, which is the third point I want to talk about. Let me talk about the systems for a second. You may not know this actually, but studies have shown that the most important, clear difference between a developed nation and a third world nation is actually in the systems. One of such important work is by two MIT professors, Abderon Acemoglu and James Robinson. They blamed, for instance, the poverty in Africa on the systems. And by the systems, they mean the rule of law, the strength of the institutions, and the people's trust in them. So you take Africa, for instance, with 53 member states and 1.3 billion people, but almost all the countries within the continent have the same problems in common. What are those problems? Politicians would skate through scandals easily, corruption, and organized crime would go unpunished, unprosecuted. The poor get poorer, and they get hooked on drugs on the street, and the streets become an eyesore with crime altogether. When the people get disgruntled enough and they go on the streets, national protest against hardship or government overreach are met with the military unleashed on civilians in this country, on these countries. But the governments actually never stop talking about the economic hardship that the people are grappling with in these countries and how concerned they feel for the people. And these are the reasons why an entire continent is often defined by poverty and corruption. And I'm just taking Africa here as a microcosm of that situation across the globe. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you as Canadian. You think about it for a moment. Does it sound familiar to you as Canadian? Have you heard any issues like this of late, maybe in the last decade or not? So when I say Canada is suffering from systemic disintegration, it's not just commentary. It's not political commentary at all. It's a warning, actually. And it's easy to flippantly dismiss what I'm saying right now until it becomes undeniable before all of us as people. Let me go to the fourth point, which is, where do we go from here as a nation? Let me return first of all to the question I asked in the beginning. Is the desired Canada still possible in 2025? I think the answer depends on what we're willing to confront as a people. Are we willing to admit that mass immigration, for instance, while on the surface sounds morally virtuous, needs to be economically viable for us? Are we willing to acknowledge that affordability isn't just about interest rates going down or not? It's about the priorities that we have as a nation. Are we willing to rebuild institutions, not just preserve them or manage them and patch them up? Because preserving them and patching them up alone won't fix the decay we are facing right now. Are we willing to let go of identity politics and political division among us long enough to be able to rebuild a politics of ideas where ideas thrive among us as people? Are we willing to stop pretending that taxing the middle class into poverty just to fund foreign aid and domestic social experiments is a sustainable strategy or not? It hasn't worked for us for over a decade and more now, and I don't think it would magically start working for us. The idea of a desired Canada is one where disagreement is not a crime, where journalists investigate without the fear of social exile or being ostracized from society, where government is questioned, not hated by the people, but questioned with reason, and where government also doesn't weaponize media against the people. And it's a place where academics, this one is very important, it's a place where academics truly become the intellectual compass for the nations, not a place where activists are raised for our nation, where opportunities exist not as talking points by politicians, but as a real path towards economic migration for us collectively as a people. Now, what's the roadmap forward out of this, and what's my plan? That's the fifth point I want to talk about. So here's what I'm proposing for myself and for this channel. Over the next 12 weeks, for instance, I am going to be exploring some of these topics that I've talked about in greater details. Topics like immigration, like housing, like national identity, like healthcare, like the state of journalism and media in our country, like political leadership, institutional reforms. Those are very important topics right now, especially having come out of the elections, whatever outcome you were expecting as an individual or maybe as a people. We put that aside, but we try to build a nation together. And each week I'm going to be talking about each one of these topics, either as a monologue or actually exploring them with experts. I've said it before, I am an immigrant and I've worked extremely hard to achieve some of the successes that I have right now. So to the young person who is watching this right now and wondering how to thrive in a system that feels like it's slowly falling apart, I will be exploring topics of self-leadership and how you can thrive within the broken system. I have experienced it before, I can speak to it. I would also be talking to Canadians, people like you, like myself, not just political pundits, because I actually think the wisdom we need to chart a roadmap forward as a people isn't only in parliament, it's actually in the lived experiences of all of us collectively, as teachers, truck drivers, nurses, small business owners, and recent graduates who are struggling to get jobs, and even retirees who are struggling to stretch their OAS to the end of the month. Let me also put this out there. If you have a unique story of resilience or success, or if you're working on something really cool, super intelligent thing that you're doing right now, just reach out to me if you'd love for me to feature you on the podcast on a very cool conversation together. But let me leave you with this final thought, which is a call to introspection for us as a people. I do not think Canada is finished. In fact, I've said it many times, Canada is a great nation with huge potential that needs to be tapped into. The people are wonderful, and the nation collectively is a great one. But Canada right now is at crossroads. Waiting for every election cycle won't cut it. I've experienced this before as well. Or waiting for 2 decades, for instance, for a housing bubble to burst so you can get into the housing market won't cut it either. In 2 decades, you're 20 years plus. The question isn't whether we can go back to some mythical golden era as a people. We can't. It's hard to go back to the past. It's impossible, actually. The question is whether we will choose deliberately, thoughtfully, and courageously as a people to build something better, something coherent, something sustainable together for us as a people. And maybe, just maybe, something true would emerge from that for us, something beyond our political affiliations and preferences and idiosyncrasies as a people. So, is the desired Canada possible again in 2025? I don't know. But I do know one thing for sure. We can't find out by staying silent and folding our arms as a people and waiting for magic to happen. It will happen by the collective effort, the uniformity of ideas that thrive, purposes that can drive and foster change, and economic, possibilities and migration for us as a people. That is where our desired change will lie. I want to know what you think about this topic, actually, if a desired Canada is still possible in 2025. There's a whole lot to look forward to on this channel, and I'm inviting you to come along with me. If you made it this far, please support the effort on the channel by subscribing and sharing the video in your social circle. If you find it inspiring enough, give it a like as well, and I'll be seeing you very soon. Well, take care. Bye-bye. Revaluate is a project I embarked upon to spark meaningful conversations that can inspire critical thinking as we navigate the adventures of life. The analytics on this channel show about 95% of the viewers on the channel haven't subscribed yet. So you do me a favor by clicking the subscribe button right now. Then I'll keep my promise to continually improve on the quality of the conversations that are produced on this channel every time.